Oh, hold on. There you go. So, hey guys, what's up, everybody? So, today this video going to do a reaction to SomeDude's MCU is Phase 5. So, today the video we're going to reaction part 1 and part 2. Yes, so anyway, so before the reaction, make sure subscribers and play the edition run and thumb up. So, let's start.
Hello everyone, this will be phase 5 of my What If Marvel Kept All of Their Character Rights. So without further delay, let's begin. Kicking off this phase will be Fantastic Four Battle in the Deep. The movie kicks off with a ship sailing throughout the Atlantic Ocean. In this ship, we would see various amounts of advanced technology, and one of the crew members would confront their captain. We've been searching for hours. Don't you think it's time to call it quits? The captain would look at this crew member and respond with, "Come on, where's your sense of adventure? We barely even started." And that is until a scanner picks up a strange phenomenon going on, and the captain would look at it and would say, I feel like we're getting closer. I can just feel it. The ship would suddenly start to crack and vibrate. All of the other crew members would be a bit startled, but the captain would gather his bearings. "Don't worry, men. It's just the water pressure." The ship would start to vibrate and shake once again, and the captain would now grow even more startled, as these were calm waters, so it doesn't make sense for the ship to be swaying like this. That is until all of a sudden, blue people would begin to climb up the ship and confront the crew members. Each and every one of the crew members would be shocked and scared, and the blue people would proceed to attack, killing everyone on board. After the deed is done, all of the blue people would stand in formation as if they're waiting for someone, and as if on cue, we would see a man with wings on his ankles fly up and descend down on the ship. We would see him slowly walking, and the face would reveal to be Namor the Submariner. And we would see him scouring the ship, looking for any signs of the advanced technology. He would then stop, and it would appear that something has caught his eye, and he would slowly trace his hand upon one of the machines used by the shipmen, in which he would trace his hands upon a logo which reads Baxter Technologies. We would cut to New York City, where we would see Reed Richards on The Tonight Show discussing recent events, as well as trying to mitigate any destruction or damages that have been caused by the Skrull invasion. After the conference finishes, Reed is confronted by his wife, Sue Storm, and both of them would share a kiss before walking off out of the building. Reed would state how this is the 5th meeting he's had this week, and it's only Tuesday. And he says how the Skrull invasion really put a number on the city, and now that the people need reassurance that an event like this won't happen again. The couple would go outside, where they would see their car, as well as Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm, seemingly having another argument. The 4 of them would each enter the car and return back to the Baxter building, where they would be confronted by a seemingly mysterious and suspicious person waiting outside of their building. Reed Richards would be curious and confront this mysterious figure, and the figure would reveal herself to be Namora, but she appears to be in a human disguise. Reed Richards would be confused on why she is confronting him until Namora would explain that they has found his technology on their side of the ocean, and he encourages them to not have any suspicious activities going on, as their king is very superstitious. Reed Richards would wonder to himself, did she just come all this way to tell me that? Or is this a warning? Reed Richards would explain how he has no knowledge of this, in which Namora would start to get annoyed and would further reinstate her claim. Just keep your technology out of our oceans, or else you'll want to know the consequences. Namora would then walk away, seemingly blending in with the crowd. Sue Storm would approach Reed, asking who was that. Reed would tell her everything, in which Sue would be confused and a bit skeptical. But undeterred, the Fantastic Four would return back to the Baxter building, where they are greeted by their robot assistant, Herbie. The Human Torch and the Thing would go on about their own ways, and Sue would return back to her room. But Reed would be intrigued by that encounter with the mysterious woman and would further look into it to find if he can see any more details on the matter. And it takes him a while, but he would ultimately discover a mythological place called Atlantis on his computers. Reed Richards would be skeptical as he believed that this city was just a myth, but the way that the woman said to keep his technology out of the waters further increases his curiosity. And so with a bit more digging, he finds that there has been active reports dating back to the 18th century about mysterious people coming out of the waters and killing unsuspecting sailormen. Reed would be even more intrigued as he always believed that this place was a myth, but due to this recent discovery, he decides to send a drone out to scour around to see if he can find any more information, as Reed is a scientist first and a common thinker second. The scene would then shift into the city known as Atlantis, where we would see Namor the Submariner sitting on his throne. That is until one of his subjects would approach him and informing him that there has been another sighting of a mysterious source of technology coming through our waters, and it appears to be of the same design as it was the one the previous nights ago from Baxter Technologies. This would enrage Namor as he's already giving a warning to these surface dwellers, so it appears now that he has to confront them by himself and enforce his policy personally. A couple days would pass and there would still be no sign of the drone, and Reed would start to get worried as it appears that the drone might have been destroyed. That is until, as if on cue, the building would shake and him and the rest of the Fantastic Four would go outside to see what is causing it. And what caught their eye is something that none of them would have believed if you had told them. They would see a man with wings on his ankles hovering above them, which he would slowly descend and confront Reed Richards, and he would tell him that he has already given a warning for him to stay out of his waters, and since he has ignored that warning, he decides to take matters into his own hands. And then all of a sudden, Namor would punch Reed in the middle of his face, sending him flying back into the building. This would cause all of the other members of the Fantastic Four to activate their powers and attack Namor. Namor would pull up a brilliant resistance as he has strength comparable to that of the Hulk. The Thing would throw a punch at Namor, which Namor would easily catch. He then proceeds to kick the Thing in the legs, trying to get him down on one knee, before kicking him away, sending him turtling through the opposite direction. The Human Torch would be up next, and what follows through is an elemental battle between water and fire. It is a spectacle to see as we would see bystanders running away from the chaos. The Human Torch gives Namor a run for his money, but unfortunately due to Namor's many years of experience, he has dealt with fire users in the past, and thus he knows how to deal with them. And so with a quick succession of combos, Namor manages to outperform the Human Torch and knock him down to the ground. The Invisible Woman would try to entrap Namor with her invisible bubbles, trying to suffocate him, but Namor would look at this and be almost entranced by the Invisible Woman, remarking how he didn't know that surface dwellers could be so beautiful. Invisible Woman's face would betray no reaction as she would increase the intensity of her bubble until Namor would clasp his hands and proceed to burst out the bubble with his bare fist before dashing towards the Invisible Woman and grabbing her by the neck. But Reed would ultimately come to and proceed to trap Namor using his elastic body. Namor would easily break through of this, grabbing Reed by the face and stripping him off of him. The Thing would come barreling down from above and try to crush Namor, but Namor would dodge quickly, jumping out of the way, and would proceed to dash back at the Thing, punching him through the concrete, and would proceed to dash towards him once more before kicking him at the side of a building. All of this chaos would attract the attention of the police, and we would see multiple cop cars surrounding the area. Namor, seeing as how he didn't want to draw this much attention, would proceed to look at the Invisible Woman, who is still dazed from his attack. Namor decides to think on his feet and would proceed to take the invisible woman as a hostage before returning back into his domain, jumping off and flying using his ankle wings. The Human Torch would try to chase after them, but due to the beating he received from Namor, he is weak and doesn't have the strength to go flying for that long. After the encounter, we would see the Fantastic Four back at the Massacre building, licking their wounds, and we would see Reed Richards furious at himself as he knows that he was just given a warning, but he decides to operate anyway. Johnny Storm is still injured, and the Thing is a little bit flustered and embarrassed that he got folded like that. He would insist that he asks the Avengers for help, but Reed, being the prideful man that he is, denies that and says that this is a matter that they must deal with on their own. He mentions that he still has the location tracked down on his last drone, and maybe they could use that information to track down Namor's whereabouts and bring Sue back. In the underwater city of Atlantis, we would see Sue Storm trapped in a dungeon. We would see Namor slowly approach her cell, and we would see them start to converse a little bit. Sue Storm remarking that he doesn't have to pretend like he's the good guy here, as he knows that her team would be here at any moment and break her free. And in this scene, we would see Namor start to flirt with Sue a little bit as he would explain who he is as well as the origins of his city. And this scene would mimic that scene with Namor and Shuri, but it would be a bit more flirtatious at the tone, since as Namor would agree to let Sue Storm out of her cell as a way to show her his city and to have her see the reason why he must keep it a secret, as he believes that mankind is a force of destruction. And this scene would pretty much more or less be the same as when Namor was showing Shuri around Talakan, I think that was called. Oh, so stupid. I don't know why they couldn't just call it Atlantis. But this scene would basically mimic that. And at the end of the scene, we would see Namor start to intertwine his hands with Sue's. Sue would pull away, but Namor would grab her hands back and would proceed to face her, cupping her cheek. Sue would then back away, stating that she's married. But Namor would insist, saying how she could stay here forever and she won't have to worry about any of her mortal troubles ever again. We would then see Namor brush Sue's hair back as Invisible Woman would start twiddling with her fingers. Back at the Fantastic Four's base of operations, we would see them start to get ready to travel to Atlantis as they would head off using an aircraft, as well as it would shapeshift into a submarine if need be. They need to get into the water, in which they do, and it would take them a while, but as if it wasn't for Reed's technology, they would have never found it. But eventually they do, where they would be confronted by Namor's guards, and they would surround the ship. The Fantastic Four, using advanced scuba diving gear, would proceed to blast out of the ship and would engage in a battle with each of Namor's soldiers. We would see the Human Torch having a tougher time, though, as he is submerged in water and his firepower isn't nearly as effective as it is on land, if it even works down here at all. But the combined efforts of the Thing and as well as Reed Richards are able to subdue most of Namor's guards, and this would cause Namor himself to enter the battlefield, in which he would confront the three and he would state their business. Reed would look at Namor with disdain and would say that their business is to get his wife back. Namor would look down at Reed almost with disgust, before Sue would then appear right beside Namor. Reed would be confused on why Sue isn't in a cell. Sue would explain to the team that Namor was just showing her around the city and would state that he would leave them alone if Reed was invading on his city. Reed would agree to these terms, but that would be until Namor would speak up, demanding that Reed Richards fight him in a duel, and the winner would proceed to gain the hands of Sue Storm. Reed would look at Namor with anger, saying as how Sue isn't just some prize to be won, but Namor would further reinstate his claim, as it was either that or none of them are leaving. As Namor says this, his guards would proceed to point their weapons at the Fantastic Four, reinforcing his claim. And so, with no other option, Reed Richards would agree to this duel, and Namor would state the ground rules, and he would tell Mr. Fantastic to follow him to the stadium. Human Torch would be surprised. Wait, you guys are fighting now? Namor would look at the Human Torch as if the answer wasn't already obvious, before he proceeds to mock Reed Richards. Oh, what? Is now not the best time for you? Don't worry, I've got all day. This would annoy Reed Richards more than you'd expect, and he would agree to follow Namor. And so, the Fantastic Four, Namor, and as well as Namor's guards would make their way to the stadium, where in each corner we would see Namor readying his trident, as well as Reed Richards preparing himself for the battle. In his corner, we would see both Johnny Storm and the Thing trying to hype him up, and we would see Sue also in his corner. And so, one of Namor's guards would proceed to start the battle, and both Namor and Reed Richards would charge at each other. Reed Richards would try to enlarge his fist and try and catch Namor, but Namor would dodge and would proceed to uppercut Reed in the chin, sending him flying back. Namor would then charge at Reed, trying to stab him with his trident, but Reed, due to his elastic body, would dodge with ease and would proceed to wrap himself around Namor, debilitating his movements. Namor would try to break free, but Reed Richards would hold steady. That is, until Namor would proceed to do the same action as he did before, where he would grab Reed's face and strip him off him. Reed would go flying, and Namor would double down on this encounter, crashing his fist onto Reed's gut before sending him down to the ocean floor with a double axe hammer to the head. Namor would descend down to Reed's level and would proceed to stomp on his head with the heel of his shoe, and would proceed to mock him by rubbing his foot on the back of Reed's head. And Namor would prepare his trident, intent on dealing a finishing blow. That is, until Reed would wrap his elastic arms around Namor's arms, stopping the trident mid-strike. He would then proceed to wiggle out of Namor's foot and would proceed to use his head to dash towards Namor's head, crashing onto him, and this would stumble Namor back before Reed would follow onto this onslaught, using his hands to bash towards Namor, hitting him with a succession of combos, and this would proceed to stumble Namor back as well, as he is overwhelmed by all of these punches, and so Reed would proceed to wrap his arms around Namor's arms once more, before he would lean his head back as far as he can, before using his momentum to crash towards Namor's forehead, sending an audible crash that is heard throughout the stadium. This would cause both Reed Richards and Namor's foreheads to bleed. But Reed would use this opportunity to grab Namor's trident, forcing it out of his grasp, and hold Namor at the tip of his trident towards his neck. The match would then be called, with Reed Richards as the winner. Namor would be enraged and would almost not allow Reed to leave, but then he remembers his deal, and reluctantly he allows each of the members of the Fantastic Four to leave his city, but with the promise that they would never return or invade on his privacy ever again. But then he would have one last look at Sue before the Fantastic Four would then depart the city of Atlantis and return back to the Baxter Building after a couple of hours. And the Fantastic Four would return to their usual activities. But Sue would pull Reed Richards to the side and would tell him some incoming news that could be the worst or the best thing to happen to Reed Richards. Sue Storm is pregnant. The next movie will be The Marvels, and this will essentially be a better version of the original movie, where we would see Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, as well as Spectrum joining forces to save the universe. And I'd have the plot be much more cohesive and consistent, as well as making Captain Marvel more of an interesting character. Coming up after the Marvels will be Ghost Rider. And I'd have this movie be rated M, as well as having Johnny Blaze as the main Ghost Rider of the MCU. The main villain I'm thinking of for this movie is Mephisto, and I'd have Robbie Reyes, Ghost Rider from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., make an appearance in this movie as well. As for the actor, I don't really mind who plays Johnny Blaze, as long as he has that variety, that level of emotion and aura of death that surrounds Ghost Rider. The plot of this movie will essentially be Ghost Rider trying to escape the shadow of Mephisto. And we would see him being tested by Mephisto, where we would fight demons and Mephisto's forces. And throughout the movie, we would also see Robbie Reyes assisting Johnny Blaze in this conquest. And so at the end of the movie, we would see both Johnny Blaze and Robbie Reyes standing side by side, confronting Mephisto, and which would result in an ultimate battle. And this battle would require a lot of CGI and practical effects, but I think that it could be good. And this battle would showcase really the mystical side of the MCU as well as the magical side as well, just to show how OP the characters can be, akin to the comic. And it will be just enough to show the audience that these are the heavy hitters of the universe. And so both of the Ghost Riders won't defeat Mephisto, of course, but just subdue him to stay out of their business. We would get a post-credit scene teasing another Ghost Rider villain, Blackheart. The next movie will be Thor, the God Butcher. And as you might have guessed, the main villain I'd have for this movie will be Gore. And he would be portrayed much better than he was in Taika Waititi's movie. So Gore would be a much more prominent threat and he'll be taken more seriously. And in order to ensure that, I'd have more scenes devoted to Gore and his conquest of killing each god. So we would see him going on basically a murder spree, where we would see him killing each god in each different pantheon. Also, it will be established that Gore is in hold of the Necro Sword, which is basically a symbiote and is connected to Null, the god of symbiotes, which is a character that I have plans for later on in the MCU. And so all of this killing would then attract the attention of Thor, who, with the help of Beta Ray Bill, would search for this God Butcher and put a stop to his crimes. And he would also leave Loki in charge of New Asgard while he's away, which is an idea that Loki definitely does not mind. And so this movie would pretty much be more of a crime/thriller movie more than a superhero one, but it would basically be both Thor and Beta Ray Bill trying to uncover the mystery of the God Butcher and going to each of his sites where we would see a bloodbath of murder and death. Thor would be shocked and appalled that someone could have the power to do this, as well as the audacity. Beta Ray Bill would be shocked as well, saying, what crimes could the gods have committed to invoke such ferocity? Throughout their journey, they would also come across another Asgardian, Valkyrie, who I'll have be played by a different actor this time just for comic accuracy. But her story would more or less be in line with her original origin in the MCU, where her sisters were slain, but not by Hela, but instead by the God Butcher. And so she agrees to help Thor and Beta Ray Bill on their quest. And so, with the combined efforts of Thor, Valkyrie, and Beta Ray Bill, each of them managed to confront the God Butcher, which enacts an ultimate battle between the colliding forces. But Gore would prove to be more of a match than the three allies, in which he would proceed to overpower them using the power of the Necro Sword and leave them for dead. But miraculously, each of them managed to survive thanks to Beta Ray Bill's quick thinking in managing to get away from Gore's wrath. Now back at New Asgard, each of them are bruised and beaten, trying to figure out a strategy as a way to defeat the God Butcher. It is here where they decide that they must visit the Greek pantheon in order to seek help. And so Thor, Beta Ray Bill, and Valkyrie would arrive at Mount Olympus, where they would be confronted by Zeus. And Thor would try to ask Zeus for his help, but Zeus would not take the threat seriously as he believes that Gore is not a match for him. Zeus is also furious as to why this other pantheon is entering in his domain. That is until we would hear a large crash and one of the pillars at Mount Olympus would fall, creating a large shatter throughout the mountain. Up above, we would see Gore the God Butcher in the distance, smiling with sadistic glee as he uses his powers to dash forth toward the gods and proceeds to engage in a battle with each of the 12 Olympian gods. He takes out Artemis and Apollo easily, as well as managing to subdue both Poseidon and Demeter. He deals with all the other gods, but surprisingly, Ares is not amongst them, as he appears to be off somewhere else. Thor, as well as Beta Ray Bill and Valkyrie would try to assist, but they would still prove to be no match as Gore would be too powerful. Thor would look at Zeus, intending on dealing a finishing blow. That is until he is tackled by Thor and thrown into another space of the mountain. Gore would then backhand the god of thunder, sending him flying, and this is where he would reveal his plan of using the goddess Eternity to grant him one wish, his only wish. Every god dead at his feet. And so, he would dash towards the air and make his exit. Thor, Beta Ray Bill, and Valkyrie know what their next move should be, and they should go after Gore and stop him. And Thor would try one last time to enlist the help of Zeus, but Zeus would angrily cast him away, seeing Thor as the reason as to why Gore attacked Mount Olympus in the first place, seeing as if that Gore has followed Thor and his party here, leading to the destruction of his home. We would then see Zeus vow vengeance upon the god of thunder, saying how he will stalk him for all of his miserable days. Beta Ray Bill would be insulted and would try to attack Zeus, but Thor would hold him back, telling him that it isn't worth it and that they need to go stop Gore now. And so the trio, all on their own, would head to Gore's location, where they would proceed to have one final battle. At the place of Eternity, we will see the trio have a valiant effort in trying to stop Gore, but they are still no match, as the goddess herself appears and Gore would proceed to make his wish. That is until he is tackled by Beta Ray Bill, which allows enough of a distraction for Thor to make his wish to the eternal goddess to stop Gore and his madness. This wish would be granted, and we would slowly see the god butcher chip away until he is reduced to nothing. The movie would end with the trio arriving back at New Asgard, where we would see our reluctant Loki seemingly does not want to give up the throne until he is forced to by Thor. And we would also see Valkyrie making her new home in New Asgard, seeing as how she might not be so lonely after all. We would get a post-credit scene of Zeus still at his throne, the day's events still fresh on his mind, which makes him angry and angrier every time he thinks about it. And it appears as though he is talking to someone, and only one sentence would exit his mouth. Thor Odin's son must die. Bring me his head. And the camera would shift into the figure of Hercules.
Yay.
We would see him kneel down and nod at his father in obedience, knowing what his next mission will be. The project following will be Daredevil Season 4. And this will essentially be a continuation of the Netflix Daredevil series. So it would basically be the Season 4 that we never got. And I'd have this take some elements of Daredevil Born Again, where we would see Muse as the main villain of the season. I would also have Bullseye as another main villain and Kingpin return to power. Have the Punisher be featured in this season as well, as sort of an ally to Daredevil, but he mainly does his own thing. The movie following this will be Nova. The movie starts in Xandar, and the screen would shift into that of the Nova Corps headquarters. We would see certain experiments being tested using that of the Power Stone, and which the way I would go about it is it would be similar to how Earth was experimenting with the Space Stone, as I believe if humans can make something out of an Infinity Stone, then I figured why not any other planet. And so these tests would be similar to that of the Super Soldier test, but way more powerful, and would turn normal Nova soldiers into elite one-man armies, inheriting the powers of the Power Stone. And so the forces would be chucked full of these guys until one day they're attacked by a mysterious force, which would reveal itself to be the forces of Thanos' army. And this will essentially be the scene of Thanos invading Xandar in order to get the Power Stone that we knew was off-screen during the events of Infinity War. And so the Nova Force would try a valiant effort, but there are no match for the forces of Thanos. But miraculously, one of the troops managed to survive and are sent off the planet in search for help. Thanos notices this and sends off a fleet of his own to chase the spaceship. Inside the spaceship, it would reveal to be the same person who at first mocked Peter Quill, but gained his respect, and now he is injured and is being chased by a fleet of Thanos' army. And so The chase goes on for a while until all of the ships encounter an asteroid field in which the skilled is managed to make his way through without any effort, but Thanos' fleet has more trouble as one by one each of the ships get hit by a straight asteroid, but we see one of the ships still maintaining course until it is ultimately hit by an asteroid as well. And so, thinking that he is safe, the remaining Nova Corps agent would proceed to head off into his destination. But slowly, we would see one of the other ships from Thanos' fleet managing to survive the asteroid onslaught and is currently en route chasing the ship that is housing the Nova agent. On Earth, we would see a young man, about 21 to 22, and he is seen on his dirt bike, riding through a mountainous terrain. That is until he peers up at the sky and noticing a wreckage flying towards from the atmosphere and landing just a couple of yards away from him. Curious, the boy would proceed to use his dirt bike and travel towards the destination, in which he would encounter a crashed spaceship with what appears to be an alien inside. He slowly gets close to the spacecraft as he sees the Nova Corps agent injured and barely clinging on to life. Quickly, the Nova agent acts in haste and informs the boy that he has no time left and that he must harness his energy and avenge the Nova Corps. The boy is confused and doesn't even know what the hell he means and thinks that he is some drunk. But then again, he did just fall from the sky, so he doesn't think that's very likely. The Nova agent continues, seeing as he feels as if he's been followed, and urges the young man to act in haste and absorb his energy in order to harness the powers of Nova. The young man is still confused and stumbles upon his words. That is until the Nova agent will grab his hands and makes him swear that he'll avenge the Nova Corps and save the galaxy from the clutches of Thanos. The young man would look at the Nova agent for a second, but then would hastily agree, seeing as how he doesn't have any other option. The Nova agent would ask the young man, what's his name? Richard. Richard Ryder. Richard Ryder, I hand to you the abilities and powers of Nova. And so a blinding light would ensue, casting an enlightening field that could be seen for miles. And so the light would dissipate, and we would see Richard Ryder fully enclosed in Nova armor. He would proceed to look at himself, not really sure what to make of it. That is until he senses a weird presence and would start towards the sky, where he would see another spaceship crash land. And he is curious, thinking that this is another Nova agent. That is until the spaceship would crash open, revealing itself to be a mysterious alien-looking figure who introduces himself as Diamond Head. And for those of you who don't know, Diamond Head is basically an old Nova villain. And so it appears that his original target has already died on the way here. So seeing as this new Nova is in his field of sight, he figures that he'll just have to kill him in order to please Thanos. Richard Ryder stumbles back and is confused on why this guy all of a sudden wants to kill him. And Diamond Head would not hesitate to dash towards the new Nova, smashing his fist towards his face, and which would result in an ultimate battle with an inexperienced Nova fighting the furious Diamond Head. The battle is intense, as Diamond Head would seemingly get the upper hand, and Nova would be overwhelmed as not knowing really how to fight, and is then knocked out by Diamond Head and dragged off into a ship, heading back towards the location of Thanos' fleet. And so this movie will essentially be the plot of a young Richard Ryder Nova learning his powers and trying to get a hold of it, while also facing this new threat in Diamond Head. And slowly throughout the film, we would see him start getting more used to his powers until he is ultimately competent enough to defeat the forces of Diamond Head and head back to Xandar, in which he is shocked to see the ruined planet destroyed by Thanos' fleet. He curses at himself, seeing as how he was too late and he never managed to fulfill the Nova agent's request, his dying wish. We would see Richard Ryder wallowing in his self-grief, That is until he looks up to see a spaceship and he enters in a battle scene prepared to defend himself. That is until a familiar man steps out and accompanied by his team. What really weirds Noah out is what appears to be a talking raccoon and tree walking alongside the man. Who the hell are you, dude? And so the screen would cut to black. The next movie will be The Amazing Spider-Man 5. The movie would start with a chase scene where we would see a man who seems as if he's running away from the cops, which he is, as we will see multiple police cars heading towards his direction, and we would see him start to stumble as he would make his way in the outskirts of New York City, where he would stumble across a lot of rocks and dirt, causing him to trip and drop his wallet. In his wallet, we would see his stuff fly out and land on the ground, where we would see a peculiar ID with the name of Flint Marco. And he would have no time to pick up his wallet as the police were on his trail, so he would quickly run towards the nearest site he could find, which, unfortunately for him, would be an experimental site where they're testing out a new machine. Clumsily, this man would fall into that experiment, and unknowing to the scientists, they activate the machine, which causes a reaction in which would leave the man for dead, supposedly. But hours later, we would see a figure start to rise from the sands, and out would step towards the man who is covered in sand before he looks at a framed picture of what seems to be his daughter, and he regains consciousness just enough for him to morph back into his human form as he would slowly stumble out of the machine. Later on, we would see him make his way back to New York City, where it would appear as if he's trying to enter an apartment building. So he would climb in the fire escape and enter through a window, where he would enter a kitchen. He is walking through an apartment before he stops in front of a door. Slowly, he would creak it open to find a little girl laying there. This would be revealed as Sandman's daughter, who is terminally ill and is the reason why he is in the life of crime in the first place, as to trying to get enough money to find a treatment for his daughter. Flint would look longingly at his daughter, not wanting to wake her up. That is until a voice would be heard from behind him, and it would reveal Flint's ex-wife and his daughter's mother. "You need to leave now. I just wanted to see my daughter." "You're a wanted criminal, William. We don't need that type of baggage in our lives. So either you leave now or I dial the police." Flint would look at his daughter one last time before making an exit, still not wanting to wake her up. Before he exits back out the window, he turns to his ex-wife. "I'm not a bad guy. I'm just someone with bad luck." And he would make his leave before his ex-wife could call the cops, and he would stumble across the street, unsure of what to do next, but reminding himself of his daughter and why he's doing what he's doing in the first place. His mind is set, as with these new abilities, he might have an easier way of making money. The screen would shift into the daytime, where we would find Peter Parker entering the Daily Bugle building, where we would find J. Jonah Jameson up to his usual antics. So J. Jonah would call in both Peter and Eddie Brock into his office, seeing as how they are his best photographers, and he has an assignment for them. And if one of them succeeds, he'll have a promotion ready. Both Peter and Eddie are ecstatic as they need the money. The challenge would be to catch Spider-Man in the act, meaning to catch Spider-Man doing criminal activities, and as a way to slanderize him and paint him as a criminal. Peter would roll his eyes, seeing as how that would never be possible, but Eddie would accept the challenge, and he would look at Peter. "Sorry, pal, but count your days. That promotion is mine. You'll never get that shot, dude." "Yeah, we'll see about that." Peter would then leave work and enter inside of a strangely luxurious apartment building, and it would be revealed that it is both him and MJ's apartment that they share together. Well, mostly MJ, as she is the one paying the rent with her supermodel career doing numbers. Peter was at first uncomfortable with having MJ take care of the expenses, but Mary Jane would say that it's no big deal. Both Peter and Mary Jane would embrace and share a kiss. And Peter would explain the assignment that JJJ had for him. Mary Jane would laugh it off, seeing as how that shot couldn't be possible. And throughout this discussion, it would be revealed that Peter is nearing the end of his college life and he is set to graduate soon. And so currently he is in the option of taking a job at either Stark Industries, Baxter Enterprises, or Horizon Labs as a means to earn more income. But midway while Peter is saying this, there is a breaking news update of a bank robbery being taking place on a truck. Peter would sigh as his black suit would wrap around him almost automatically as he would kiss MJ one last goodbye and swing out of the window towards the crime scene. We would see the truck being bombarded by what appears to be sand as the drivers have no idea what's going on. And inside of the truck, we would see the Sandman collecting as much money as he can and stuffing it in a bag. But then we would see Spider-Man whip through the air as he would land on top of the truck and break through using his strength, entering inside and confronting the Sandman. Spider-Man's surprise would be immeasurable. John Cena? No, I'm kidding. He doesn't say that, but holy shit, imagine. Spider-Man would say, "Look, I don't know who you think you are, pal, but I don't think this money belongs to you, so I'm gonna need you to put everything back." The Sandman would look at him. "Look, I know who you are, and I don't want to hurt you, but you need to stay out of my way." Spider-Man would remark, "You must not have heard. I'm the sheriff around these parts," in which Sandman would try to swing at him. Spider-Man would dodge and would punch him in the stomach. But surprisingly, Spider-Man's hand would go through his torso, exiting out of the other side, and his hand would be entrapped in what appears to be sand. The Spider-Man would be confused, and Sandman would enlarge his hands into a large sand fist and punch him through the truck, sending him flying throughout the street. And this battle would pretty much be similar to that of the Spider-Man and Sandman first battle in Spider-Man 3. Except, while Spider-Man and Sandman are fighting, a mysterious green mist would surround the truck. And Spider-Man and Sandman would stop fighting and look around, confused. "Is this you? I thought this was you." And all of a sudden, a mysterious man would appear out of thin air, stopping the truck. And his attire would be questionable at most, seeing as how he has a fishbowl on his head. "Rejoice, New York citizens. Mysterio is here to save the day." This event would cause enough of a distraction for the Sandman to slip away using his dust cloud to get out of the battle scene. And Spider-Man would try to track him down, but it would be pointless as he would look back at Mysterio to see him being surrounded by curious onlookers. Yes, I take autographs, people." Spider-Man would be confused, but seeing as how this new Mysterio guy isn't really posing as a threat, he would then later swing away, remarking to himself, "Where the hell did these guys come from?" The next day, we see Peter heading back to the Daily Bugle, where we would see new newspapers of Mysterio being flashed around as J. Jonah Jameson would be standing in his office with a big grin on his face. Peter would be confused on what's going on before Eddie would tell him that this new Mysterio guy is a new sensation nowadays, and how people are blaming Spider-Man for the amount of damages that the truck has caused and painting Mysterio as the good guy. So, what was that about me not getting that photo? Looks like your guy Spider-Man is finally showing his true colors, and it's only a matter of time before I can catch that perfect moment. Eddie would smirk at Peter before heading off his own way. This would annoy Peter, as even though Spider-Man slander wasn't anything new to him, this particular incident was really starting to get under his skin, as we would see the effects of the symbiote start to take over his psyche a bit. We would then cut to nighttime, where we would see Spider-Man on his usual patrol, still pretty upset about today's events. But that would be until a mysterious figure catches his eye, and it looks to be familiar too, as he would appear to follow this figure, and when he would catch up, it would reveal to be none other than Black Cat. Spider-Man would be confused and would ask Black Cat what she's up to, She would respond that she was just in the neighborhood and thought that she might need a little fun. She gets closer to Spider-Man as she says this. I like the new suit, by the way. You copying me now? Spider-Man would back away, which would cause Black Cat to pout, before she would say that she was investigating a crime king known as Tombstone, who was trying to rise up to power after the fall of Kingpin. Spider-Man would be intrigued, and Black Cat would say that he was just heading to his location now, and she might need his help to take him down, as she didn't want another Kingpin trying to rule the streets. Spider-Man would agree, and he would follow Black Cat to Tombstone's location, where they would eventually make it and would ultimately have a battle with Tombstone's men, as his men would try to defeat the two, but the two are in perfect sync as they manage to defeat his men with ease, and they encounter Tombstone, angered by their intrusion, and would proceed to attack them. Spider-Man would have a little bit of trouble, and Black Cat would still be defeating Tombstone's men. But Spider-Man all of a sudden would start to snap, and he would proceed to fight more viciously than he usually would. And thus, with his new vicious onslaught, he would overpower Tombstone and would proceed to beat him within an inch of his life. Black Cat would be surprised by the brutality, and Spider-Man would reel back his fist, attempting to deal a finishing blow. That is, until he stops himself midway through and would be surprised at his own actions. He would turn back towards Black Cat and would dip out the window with a bloody Tombstone in his wake. Spider-Man would be confused and would zip through the New York skyline. He would be surprised at his own brutality and would question, was that really him in control of his actions? Peter decides to just sleep it off, and so the next day would come, and we would see him start to make his way towards the Daily Bugle, where we would catch a newspaper in his field of vision, and in the newspaper, it would reveal a story about Spider-Man going mad and robbing a bank. Peter would be confused until he would look at who published the photo, Eddie Brock. This would enact a rage in Peter as he was storming the Daily Bugle building, attempting to confront Eddie. Peter would look around until he would spot Eddie being celebrated by the other Daily Bugle staff, and he would walk towards Eddie. Eddie would see him and would proceed to give a smirk at his way. So, what was that about me not getting that photo? Peter would slam Eddie against the wall with force, shocking Eddie as he always assumed that Peter was a scrawny kid. Eddie would try to shake Peter off, but it would be no use. It was as if Peter's grip was made out of iron, and so Peter would look at Eddie. You're trash, Brock. Your photos are fake. Eddie would laugh, pretending not to know what Peter was talking about, but Peter wouldn't buy it. And so, Eddie would then lean down, whispering in Peter's ear to make sure no one else could hear. Look, you're right. Those photos are fake. But please, me and my wife were struggling. I needed that promotion. I needed that money. Please. Peter would look at Eddie with a hint of disgust. You should have thought of that earlier, chump. Peter would let go of Eddie and would stomp out of the Daily Bugle, but not before slamming a bunch of papers in J. Jonah Jameson's chest, telling him, tell your editor to check his sources next time. And with that, Peter leaves, and J. Jonah would check the papers that Peter gave him, and he would look at them in shock before looking at Eddie with disgust. We would cut to the Sandman in a warehouse counting the money that he earns from that robbery, but all of a sudden, a green mist would surround him, and he would look as if it was familiar, which it was, and Mysterio would appear in front of him. The Sandman would put his guard up, thinking that Mysterio is here to take him to jail. But Mysterio would clarify that he has no interest in any of that, and he's just posing as a hero to get the public's attention. And I know what the Sandman really wants. You want to earn enough money for your family. Sandman would be confused on what Mysterio's end goal here is, and Mysterio would just say that in order for him to truly be the hero of the city, he has to get rid of Spider-Man. And so he proposes that they have a little team up, something that'll meet both of their goals. Sandman would look at Mysterio with a bit of apprehension before reluctantly agreeing, seeing as how Spider-Man is always getting in the way of his plans and trying to get enough money. We cut to the Sandman wreaking havoc in a nearby street where he is trying to gain the attention of Spider-Man, which he would, with Spider-Man draped in his all-black symbiote suit, But this time, it looks a bit more rough around the edges, as if the suit is somehow angrier. And Spider-Man would be furious that Sandman is pulling the same stunts again. He would aim towards trying to enact an ultimate battle. That is, until green mist would surround him once again, and Mysterio would appear, casting Spider-Man in an illusion, similar to that sequence in Far From Home. And Peter would be so sick and fed up of these guys, and this would cause him to snap, and he would proceed to break out of the illusion and would beat Mysterio within an inch of his life. Sandman would be surprised by the brutality, and Peter would figure out a way to defeat the Sandman using water. And so, both the Sandman and Mysterio are beaten, but Spider-Man is still angry, and he lashes out at the crowd. The crowd would be terrified and would proceed to run away from the hero. And this is where we would see Spider-Man start to reflect on his actions before swinging away, trying to get away from the civilians before he could harm them. Meanwhile, we would see Eddie Brock entering a church, in which we would see him sitting down, and it would appear as if he was praying. I come to you today. My wife has left me. I was fired from my job, and I recently got a visit from the hospital, and it turns out that I'm dying of cancer. And so, with this visit, I am praying, wishing for one thing. Please, kill Peter Parker. Simultaneously, we would see Spider-Man on top of a church, where we would see him start to ring the bell, trying to get the symbiote off of him. The symbiote's voice would be omnipresent, as it would whisper in Peter's head. You are weak without me, Parker. Come, let me fully bond with you, and we will accomplish great things together. Peter would try his best to ignore the voice and would proceed in a desperate attempt to take the symbiote off. You still don't get it, do you? You are my vessel, my boy, my body, my Spider-Man. Peter would ignore the voice again and would try in a desperate attempt to ring the bell and take the symbiote off of him, which would work as we would see the symbiote start to scream. No, Peter, stop. You are nothing without me. Peter would latch onto the symbiote, taking it off his body in a similar manner as he did in Spider-Man 3. But slowly, we would see Eddie walk to the tower as he would hear strange noises, and up above he would see a mysterious figure, as well as a strange black substance making its way down towards him. Slowly, a drop would appear on his sleeve. Eddie would try to shake it off, but more of the black substance would engulf him, and his screams would be muffled by the black goo entering his mouth. Eddie would be terrified as he didn't know what was going on, and we would see Peter on top of the bell, finally free of the symbiote. And so, with limited clothing, he would swing back home, not knowing what he has just caused. We would see Eddie down below, screaming in agony. That is until the screaming would abruptly stop, and we would see him slowly start to rise his head up. The screen would fade to black.
So guys, didn't realize that. So that's it, part 1 finished, so right now we're going to do part 2. So let's start, so let's see.
Hello everyone, this will be part 2 of What If the MCU Kept All the Rights to Their Characters, Phase 5. Now, let's begin. Kicking off part 2 will be Iron Man 4.
We didn't finish this
And this
Spider-Man.
movie will essentially be the deep dive of Tony Stark's character and how his life has changed drastically over the years. The villains I'm thinking of for this movie will be Titanium Man and Fin Fang Foom. And I'd have a way to incorporate Fin Fang Foom into the story, as he is a mystical dragon, and that would clash with Justin Hammer's / Titanium Man's more technological and realistic approach. I would also have Iron Man wear his black and gold suit in this movie, as I just see that as a really cool suit in the comics that he wore, and it's just a shame that he never actually got to use that armor in the MCU. So this would be the first appearance of that new armor that he has. So Tony with this new armor would clash with Justin Hammer's a titanium man suit, in which he would finally be able to replicate Tony Stark's technology. With this being the conclusion of the Stark versus Hammer rivalry, with Fin Fang Foom bringing a more mystical approach to the movie. The movie would end with Titanium Man suffering at the same fate that Obadiah Stane did at the end of Iron Man 1, where he would be a victim of his own hubris and would ultimately be killed. I still have Fin Fang Foom still around just as a character in future MCU movies. The movie following will be Namor the Submariner. And this will essentially have Namor as the star character, of course, and the villains I'd have for this movie would be Atuma, as I'd have a similar plot to The Lion King, where Atuma doesn't see Namor as a right fit to rule Atlantis, so he commits a coup with a couple of other rogue Atlantean soldiers, and it would essentially be a fight for the throne of Atlantis. And I wanted to use this movie as an opportunity to further explore Namor's character, as he was one of the first Marvel superheroes created, and I just think that it's weird that he never really had his own solo film. Also, this movie would serve to explore Atlantis more, as it is an underwater city and it brings a whole new aspect into the MCU. And I'd have the post-credit scene be a tease to the Illuminati, where we would see Charles Xavier having a meeting with Namor, seeing the Atlantean king as a fellow mutant. But Namor would express that he has no interest in what Charles has to say. But the professor would go on into further detail and explaining how he feels that the Earth may need another layer of protection. The project following will be Heroes for Hire Season 2, and this will essentially be another season of Luke Cage and Iron Fist going around and taking up jobs for money. And it would have a couple of ties to Daredevil, setting up a future Defenders crossover down the line. The movie following will be Deadpool. And this will essentially be the same movie, except, of course, it would be released about 10 years after the actual movie was released in the real world. And I'd still have Ryan Reynolds to act as Deadpool, and I would also replace Negasonic Teenage Warhead with Kitty Pryde. And it would be established that both Colossus and Kitty Pryde are trying to recruit Deadpool, as the X-Men are lacking in numbers due to the recent leaving of both Wolverine and Storm, and they are trying to recruit more members to support their cause. Deadpool would, of course, tell them to shove it, and I would actually have Deadpool make more references to the overall Marvel Universe, since rights wouldn't be an issue, as every character is under the same umbrella. And there would also be a ton of references to Spider-Man, as it will be established that Deadpool made his suit as an inspiration from Spider-Man's classic red and blue suit. After this will be Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5, and I would have this be the season finale of the show, as it would be the grand conclusion of, and would hopefully tie up any loose ends. I would also have the Avengers make an appearance in the season finale as well. The movie following will be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and this will essentially be the same, and since the second Guardians film canonically takes place a few months after the first one, Nova won't really be in this movie. And besides that, the movie would roughly stay the same. After this will be Blade, and the character will of course be played by Mahershala Ali, and I'd have the main villain be Dracula, As I would also have this movie be rated R, since I feel that would be the best rating for Blade, as his comics are pretty gory. And I think if the movie wants to be as comic accurate as possible, then that would be the ideal rating for a Blade movie. This movie would also introduce the more supernatural horror aspects of the Marvel Universe. And I'd have the post-credit scene teasing the Midnight Suns. And now, the final movie of Phase 5 will be World War Hulk.
Go, let's go! Let's
To
go!
the distant world known as Sakar, where we would peer into the world and would see a beautiful civilization, one unchanged by the Grand Master's rule, and would find itself a new ruler in the Hulk. It has been years ever since the Hulk has left his home world, and through those years, he has managed to find himself a companion in which he could share his most peaceful moments with, as well as his companions who aided him in his rebellion against the Grand Master. Hulk has also grew out of making broken sentences, as now he has the ability to talk in full coherent ones. It is just another day in Sakar, and the Hulk is tending to his wife, who he just recently discovered was pregnant, and the day he received the news was probably the happiest day in the giant's life. Everything was perfect. Now, Hulk won't lie. He did miss his companions back on Earth, but his days on that planet are over, and now he has a new life in which the people can actually appreciate him. Everything was perfect until one fateful day, a massive explosion would engulf the majority of the planet, causing chaos and would destroy a large chunk of the civilization. It was sudden and very brief, but it has brought so much destruction in its wake. The Hulk was surprised, as he does not expect this at all, and he would look around through the ruined city, trying to find his wife, until he would lay eyes on her dead corpse, as well as their unborn child. The Hulk would mourn for his wife, and he would be furious and outraged, demanding to find the source of the explosion. And so, with the help of his warbounds, he would go investigate and would see the site, which would leave him speechless. It was the same crash site in which he originally landed, where he had his Quinjet long ago. It would appear that that was the cause of the explosion. But Hulk didn't understand. He didn't know what to say. Why did it explode in the first place? Has it been rigged or encrypted somehow? Until he finally started to put the pieces together. That Quinjet was meant to kill him, and the Avengers must have tampered with it somehow in order to have it explode, thus killing him in the process. But he didn't understand. Why would his friends betray him like this? All of these emotions, anger, rage, shock, would leave him in a whirlwind, a vertigo of clashing emotions until it would ultimately cultivate into rage. And so Hulk, with a new look in his eyes, would suit up and would order his warbound companions to do also, because they will be returning back to his home world, and they will be returning with a vengeance. We cut to the Earth, and everything seems to be normal for the most part. Civilians are out doing their daily activities, and the streets are safer than they have been in a long time. We would cut to Avengers Tower, where we would see Tony seemingly working on a new invention, as well as Captain America doing some workouts. And everything seems to be normal for the most part. That is, until Stark would get a reading on his scanner and would see a strange, peculiar ship heading towards the direction of Earth. Tony would be confused on what the ship could be and would wonder if this was another attempt on Earth from the Skrulls. Hank would also look at the scanner, and he would doubt it, as that doesn't look like any of the Skrull ships that they've encountered before. The ship would be seen crossing the atmosphere as it would hover above New York. The Avengers would be on their battle stances and ready to defend in case of any emergency. And as if on cue, a large battalion of what seems to be alien soldiers would descend down from the ship and would proceed to attack the New York civilians. The Avengers would suit up and would prepare to defend, and they would attack the soldiers as well, in a unified fashion. Captain America would be confused. What the hell is going on? And who the hell are these guys? Iron Man would just say, does it even matter? They're the bad guys and they need to be stopped. Hank would go giant and would proceed to crush bands of alien soldiers. I don't know who these guys are, but they must mean business. Everyone stay sharp. We would also see Vision, Hawkeye, and Wasp assisting in the battle as well. And we would see that most of the battalion has already been defeated, and the numbers are starting to get sparse. That is until our most peculiar figure would jump out of the ship and land a couple meters in front of the Avengers. Their faces would be encapsulated in shock, as only one word would escape Tony's mouth. Bruce? The Hulk would be revealed to be in front of the Avengers, sporting full gladiatorial armor, and he would begin to walk towards the Avengers with a crazed look in his eyes. Captain America would be the first to approach. Dr. Banner, how is this possible? Why are you attacking Earth? No words would be exchanged as the Hulk's fist would crash against Captain America's face, and it would create a large audible crash along the city. Captain America would go flying a dozen feet in the air before crashing into a building. The rest of the Avengers would be left in shock as they have no idea what has caused the Hulk to be like this and why he has returned in the first place or how. We would see Captain America where he crashed, and his face would be a bloody mess with a few broken teeth as well as a cracked skull. Had it have been any other man, they would have perished right there and then, but this was the first Avenger. Only 2 words would escape the Hulk's mouth. Who's next? A news outbreak would appear to be going on, featuring the Hulk decimating the Avengers, as we would see a news camera flash with him holding Iron Man by the head before throwing him against a car. We would see the condition of the other Avengers. We would see Hawkeye barely breathing and injured severely, as well as Wasp, who is laying down next to Hank. Both injuries are no better than Hawkeye. We would also see Vision being the last defender against the Hulk. We would see him tackle the beast. Hulk would crash Vision against the window before sending him flying towards the air. Vision would use the Mind Stone in his head to blast down at the Hulk. Hulk would block the beam with his hand before jumping up to abnormal heights and slamming Vision back down against the ground. Vision would crash, and Hulk would stomp on his back, causing immeasurable pain for the synthetic android. Vision would phase through, trying to get away from Hulk, before the Hulk would try to crash his fist against Vision again, but his hands would just phase through the Vision's body. Vision would use this opportunity to try and stop the Hulk by reaching into his insides. But the Hulk would take advantage of Vision's sympathy by grabbing the body of the Wasp and throwing it towards Vision. Vision, knowing that the Wasp is in critical condition and if she takes another blow, she'll most likely be dead, has no choice but to catch the Wasp safely in his arms. She is unconscious, but still barely breathing. Vision would look up to see Hulk's fist crashing against his skull before crashing it down into the earth with a large crash, sending a shockwave for miles. Vision is now knocked out, and the Hulk will have seen defeating the entirety of the Avengers. Hulk would whir up into the air with primal fury. That is until we would see storm clouds encapsulate the entirety of New York, and a large lightning bolt would strike down on the Hulk, causing him temporary paralysis before he would gather his bearings and stand up to see the god of thunder himself, Thor, descending upon him. What madness has brought this upon you, Banner? Hulk would look up at Thor. I was wondering where you were hiding. Thor would crash down on the Hulk. The Hulk would counter by throwing his fist, and both clashes would create a large shockwave, destroying every building in sight. What would follow would be the battle of the millennia, with Thor and Hulk both exchanging powerful blows. Thor would strike the Hulk with Mjolnir, creating a large shockwave. The Hulk would counter by throwing his fist at Thor, creating another shockwave. It would appear to be the battle of a god versus a titan. But as we all know, the angrier the Hulk gets, the stronger I am. The Hulk's fist would crash against Thor's torso, sending him flying a dozen feet through the concrete. The Hulk would scream towards Thor's direction before charging to him, attempting to conduct a finishing blow. That is until a web will encapsulate Hulk's face. He would rip it off easily and return towards the direction of Spider-Man, now donning his red and blue costume once again. Jeez, talk about a noisy neighbor. The Hulk would jump towards Spider-Man and would throw his fist. Spider-Man would dodge easily, and what would follow is a game of cat and mouse, where we would see the Hulk stampeding through the New York streets, attempting to catch Spider-Man. But Spider-Man's finesse outweighs the Hulk, in which he would dash and bob and weave from the Hulk's attacks. The Hulk would grow more frustrated as he doesn't seem to be hitting anything. Spider-Man would proceed to swing away from the Hulk yet again until the Hulk would finally have enough and would crash his palms against each other. His signature move, the thunderclap towards Spider-Man's direction. The shockwave would leave the web slinger disoriented and would snap his web, causing him to collapse to the ground, still a bit disoriented from the shockwave, and the Hulk would dash towards Spider-Man, attempting to throw a punch. Before Hulk throws the punch, he would say, "Did you really think you could beat me?" A string of fire would engulf the Hulk, causing him to reel back and jump away from Spider-Man. "Of course not, you big dumb giant. I was only here to distract you." We would see the Fantastic Four behind Spider-Man. The Thing would charge first, and the Hulk would as well. Both of them would clash against each other, the Thing remarking, "Finally," before slamming his fist against the Hulk's face, causing him to stumble back a bit before the Thing would follow through with an uppercut, sending the Hulk reeling back just a bit. What would follow is an onslaught of fire sent by Johnny Storm, and Sue would attempt to trap the Hulk in an invisible bubble and attempt to suffocate him. The Hulk would break through this ad with ease and would clash against towards the Thing, sending him back a dozen feet with a mighty punch. Mr. Fantastic would attempt to entrap the Hulk using his elastic body. The Hulk would rip through him and would detangle himself away from Mr. Fantastic and would throw him towards the Invisible Woman. The Invisible Woman would catch him, but this would lead to a distraction which would cause Hulk to punch the Invisible Woman. But the Invisible Woman would activate a force field trying to block the punch, which it would work, but it was sent flying a dozen feet before crashing into a building. Johnny Storm would be enraged and would try to attack the Hulk once more. The Hulk has become more aware of this firepower and thus would block it with his arm before sending a car towards Johnny's way. It would connect, sending Johnny crashing into the street, unconscious. The Thing would retaliate by tackling Hulk head-on once more, but the Hulk would grab Thing by the head and would slam him down against the concrete, holding his head in place. We would see military forces surround the Hulk, many cars and helicopters, and you would see armed soldiers attempting to fire at the Hulk, but their bullets would do no use, as the Hulk would simply shrug them off and would crash against each car, sending each armed officer flying. We would see most of the military forces defeated, as we would see an armed officer on the ground, his leg broken. The Hulk would see this and would stomp towards the military officer. He would try to back away, but the Hulk would grab him with his large hands, would proceed to throw him into the air. Before the armed officer could hit the ground, he would be caught by a mysterious blue person, and he would then teleport back safely on the ground. And what would follow is we would see the entirety of the X-Men, and the one who caught the officer was Nightcrawler. "Hope we're not too late," says Cyclops. Hulk would vaguely remember the X-Men from their time in helping the Avengers defeat Ultron. But that didn't matter to him. If these guys were friends of the Avengers, then they were enemies to him, and he would charge towards the X-Men, but not before Cyclops would make a back away using his optic blast, sending Hulk flying a dozen feet. The rest of the team would follow. Emma Frost would attempt to use her telepathy to try and attack the Hulk's minds. The Hulk would clutch his head in pain before looking at Emma Frost, attempting to crush her. That is until the Rogue would come flying towards the Hulk, crashing into him with a fist that would send the Hulk stumbling back a couple of feet. And this would allow Gambit to use his cars to try and explode the Hulk. Colossus would also join the fray, tackling the Hulk, attempting to outpower him, but the Hulk would prove to be too strong and he would slam Colossus into the ground. Nightcrawler would teleport around the Hulk, attacking him from different angles. The Hulk would become frustrated as he can't seem to hit Nightcrawler, as every time he tries to connect a fist, Nightcrawler would just teleport away, until the Hulk would get lucky and would predict where Nightcrawler would attack next. And before Nightcrawler can get a hit in, the Hulk would slam his fist against his chest, sending him reeling back, flying a dozen feet, cracking his ribs as well as a couple more bones. Iceman would try to freeze the Hulk, but the Hulk would endure and would break away the ice before charging towards Iceman, before being tackled by a beast. The Hulk would shake him off easily and would charge towards Iceman yet again, slamming his elbow against Iceman's cheek, sending him flying through the concrete. Cyclops would be preparing his largest optic blast yet, and we would see him clutching his visors in an attempt to try and blast the Hulk away, which he would, unleashing an ultimate fury of optic blast. The Hulk would be shocked as he would be sent flying through buildings, but Cyclops would not let up, and he would continue to blast the Hulk away, concentrating his power on every level. A couple minutes would roll by until Cyclops would finally release his blast, and there would be no sign or trace of the Hulk. Emma Frost would approach Cyclops. "Nicely done, Summers." Cyclops would collapse down on the ground with exhaustion. The rest of the X-Men would gather around Cyclops. Cyclops, still on the ground, would say, "Good job, guys. I don't think he would have escaped." The Hulk would crash down on the ground a couple feet away from the X-Men. They would look on in horror and shock as they thought the Hulk was dead. The Hulk would look at the X-Men with a crazed look in his eyes. "Is that all you've got?" We would see the news broadcast yet again, but this time it would be of Hulk decimating the X-Men as he would be holding Kitty Pryde in his gigantic hand. We would cut to New Asgard as we would see Loki peering into the fight using his magical abilities before he would transfer back into the kingdom and would stomp around towards the dungeon until he would reach a peculiar cell where we would find a strange blonde man sitting down. This would appear to be Sentry. Sentry would look towards the god of mischief, not knowing what he is up to. Loki would simply state, "I know my brother wouldn't approve of this. In fact, he'd be quite furious, but seeing as there is no other option, and I'm beginning to like it here." With a clap of his hands, the Sentry would be released from the cell, and he would approach Loki. "Well, why are you doing this?" "Simple, 'cause I need your help. Last time someone needed my help, I killed a lot of people. Well, hopefully your unique set of abilities will be useful here. Now, come on, we're going to take a trip to New York." Loki would grab Sentry by the hands, and both of them would teleport away. Hulk would be still seen rampaging throughout the streets of New York, most of the city decimated due to the battle. That would be until the Hulk would appear to be trapped in what appears to be a mystical rope before out would step towards Doctor Strange, Wong, as well as multiple other sorcerers. "Dr. Banner, I know why you're upset, but for the good of the people in this city and this world, I can't allow you to go on any further." The Hulk would look at Doctor Strange. Before forcibly releasing his hands from the rope, he would then dash towards the sorcerers and would compete in an ultimate battle against them. The sorcerer would pull up a valiant resistance, but the Hulk's might would prove to be too much as most of them would be decimated. Wong would attempt to stop the Hulk, but the Hulk would throw a punch his way, but Wong would dodge using his magical shield, but would still be sent back. Doctor Strange would proceed to use his powers to enter through the Hulk's mind, and he would be confronted with a mental image of Bruce Banner. Bruce would be shocked as he has never seen anyone enter his mind like this. Doctor Strange would approach Bruce. Listen, I know you're hurting, but for the sake of everyone, you need to stop. Bruce would look at Doctor Strange before turning his head. I can't. The Hulk, he's a different entity. He's angry. I know. But you need to try and control this, Bruce. Please. Bruce would look at Doctor Strange. It's not just him. I'm angry too. Before Bruce would then clutch Doctor Strange by the neck. Doctor Strange would try to have Bruce let him go, but Bruce would be surprisingly firm in his grip. I'm angry at everyone. I'm angry at my team. I'm angry at this planet. We would cut back to see the Hulk holding Doctor Strange by the neck in real time, and is about to snap the neck of the Sorcerer Supreme. Until a rocket launcher would attack the Hulk's back, he would throw Doctor Strange into a car and would turn back to see none other than Thunderbolt Ross holding the rocket launcher just a couple of feet away from him. I was wondering when you return, you bastard. Another rocket would be launched, but this time the Hulk would catch it and throw it towards the other direction. I remember you. The Hulk would slowly stomp toward Ross. We would cut back to Ross. So do I. Ross would discard of the rocket launcher before pulling his sleeve up and would bring out a certain syringe before injecting himself with it. I remember you. I remember you all too well, Banner. I can't stop thinking of you. The Hulk would continue to stomp towards Ross. You have always been a nightmare to me, and a nightmare to my family, but no more. Now I'm going to deal with you on my own terms. The Hulk would be only mere inches away from Ross, and sometimes, to fight a monster, Hulk would be standing directly in front of General Ross before a large red fist would come crashing into his torso, sending him flying a dozen feet into the concrete. General Ross would continue to transform until he is fully transformed into the Red Hulk.
Red Hulk.
You have to become a monster. The Hulk and Red Hulk would then dash towards each other, creating another large shockwave, and would result in a battle which would have the two titans trading blows. Red Hulk would put up better of a fight, but the Hulk would continue to insist and would grow more angrier by the seconds. That is until a hammer would come crashing towards the Hulk's face, which would send him reeling back, and the hammer would call back towards Thor, and Thor would infuse lightning in it before striking the Hulk once more, sending him stumbling back. Red Hulk would look at Thor with a smile. It's about time you got here, Goldilocks. Both Thor and Hulk would exchange no more words, as their primary enemy was at the Hulk at this moment, and so both of them would continue to attack the green beast. The Hulk would put up a valiant effort, that is until the Thing would grab his arm and would slam his fist against the Hulk's face. Don't count me out, it's clobbering time. We would see Colossus join the mix as well, swinging his fist, landing a right hook against Hulk's cheek. Your figure, the Hulk Buster, now donned in black and gold, and it would reveal to be Iron Man, Tony Stark inside. So now, the Hulk Buster, Thor, Red Hulk, the Thing, and Colossus would all proceed to attack the Hulk. What would follow is the battle of powerhouses. We would see the Hulk holding his own against these five forces. But the unlikely team would surprisingly have good synergy. We would see Red Hulk clashing his fist against the Hulk's chin, an uppercut, sending the Hulk flying up towards the air. We would also see Thor use his lightning-infused hammer to blast Hulk further up into the atmosphere, before Hulkbuster would slam his fist against the Hulk's gut before using his unibeam to blast Hulk down back towards the ground in a slope-like formation, before we would also see Colossus preparing a double hammer fist, crashing his attack against the Hulk's face, which would send the Hulk reeling back and cause him to spin towards the ground. We would also see the Thing preparing preparing a punch which would land and would smack the Hulk into the concrete, creating a large crater. With the Hulk down on the ground, this would create the opportunity for the five forces to attack him. The Hulk would be ganged up on as Thor, Hulkbuster, the Colossus, the Thing, and Red Hulk would proceed to ignite their own personal attacks against him, before Hulk would release a loud roar and further infuriated would crash everyone off of him. Hulk's power is seen like never before as he's angrier beyond belief, and with one stomp, everything vibrates as if an earthquake itself was on the rise. The Hulk would then create another stomp, and everything would shake as buildings would come collapsing. The buildings that hasn't been destroyed already from the battle. Thing would try to attack the Hulk first, but the Hulk would be too powerful as he would crash his fist against Thing, caving in his chest, causing immeasurable amounts of eternal bleeding. The Thing would collapse, severely injured. Colossus would be next as he would try to attack the Hulk from behind, but the Hulk would swat Colossus away as if he were a fly, sending him flying a dozen feet into the air. Red Hulk would be up next, trying to tackle the Hulk, but he would slam his fist against Red Hulk's cheek, slamming him down into the ground. Hulk would then dart his eyes towards the Hulkbuster before charging at it and ripping it to shreds, revealing the smaller Iron Man in his damaged armor. The Hulk would then grab Iron Man and would throw him into a car. The Hulk would then look at Thor, who, with resilient effort, would manage to stand up and would confront the Hulk, engaging in one last clash before the Hulk would crash his fist against the god's face, sending him flying towards a truck, which would cause an explosion. The Hulk would look around at his enemies, seeing every one of them on the ground. He would then look around the city, seeing the chaos he has caused. Immeasurable amounts of damage and fire would surround him. The Hulk would murmur to himself, "It was just like this. It was just like this when you bastards destroyed my home." We would then see a crying child amidst the destruction. She appears to be calling out for her mother. The Hulk would look at this and would proceed to approach the child. Doctor Strange, who is still conscious, would attempt to try and stop the Hulk, but Hulk would crash his fist against the sorcerer's chest, sending him flying. Hulk would begin to approach the child again, and he would be directly in front of them. The child would still be crying, and the Hulk would reach out to her. That is into a blue and gold streak would swipe the child away from the Hulk's grasp and would place the child safely away from the monster. And then what would follow is the same blue and gold streak crashing in front of the Hulk. And it would appear to be the Sentry. In the chaos, we would see many other street-level heroes escorting the civilians away from the fighting. We would see Daredevil, as well as Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Jessica Jones evacuating the civilians. The Hulk would look at Sentry, and before he could say anything, the Sentry would simply state, "You're too loud." And with that, the Sentry would crash his fist against the Hulk's face, sending him flying into a building. The Hulk would be surprised as he did not expect this level of strength. The Hulk would then crash down against the ground once more, where his eyes would then meet that of Loki's, who would stare at the Hulk, with one event playing in his mind over and over. Loki would teleport away, leaving Sentry to deal with the monster. The Hulk and Sentry would then clash, creating a multitude of shockwaves, destroying the city farther than it has been destroyed. The Sentry would then throw the Hulk into the air for crashing against his fist into the Hulk's face, which would send him flying into the Brooklyn Bridge. Sentry would proceed to grab Hulk by the throat and would slam him down against the concrete before sliding him through the ground, before stomping and punching the Hulk directly into the concrete. The Hulk would then grab Sentry off him, throwing into one of the pillars of the bridge, which would cause it to stumble momentarily. Each and every person in every car would try to escape the onslaught, as we would see bystanders running away from the chaos as the Hulk and Sentry would continue their battle. The fight would be monumental, as it would escape the bridge and they would appear in front of another building where they would each clash each other's fist. Sentry would be overwhelmed as the Hulk would begin to overpower him. This would result in the awakening of a familiar figure. The Void would take control of the Sentry and would increase the power of Sentry thus forward, and the Void and the Hulk would clash once more, destroying multiple portions of the city around them. It was a battle like none other, as you would see many news outlets recording it. The battle would then travel into another street, where we would see the Hulk start to overwhelm the Void, as the Void would be trying to counter against the Hulk's mighty attacks, but the Hulk would slam his fist against the Void's torso, sending him flying back, and would appear to almost knock him out. The Hulk would appear to be unstoppable, as there might not be a force in this earth that could stop him from his rampage. That is until a peculiar woman would step in front of him, and it would appear to be Betty Ross, the daughter of Thunderbolt Ross, who was seeing the news and would try to calm the Hulk down from his onslaught. The Hulk would look at Betty before stomping towards her direction, but Betty would remain unflinching as she would approach the Hulk, caressing him by the hand. The Hulk would look at this gesture, unsure what to make of it, before Betty would look deep into his eyes and would simply state, "It's over, Bruce. You can stop fighting now." Those simple words would cause the Hulk to transform back into the long and overdue Bruce Banner, before Bruce would look at Betty one last time, before falling into unconsciousness. We would cut to a few months later. We would see the city start to repair itself, as we would see the likes of damage control taking care of the property damage, as well as many civilians helping each other repair their damaged shops. We would see the Avengers slowly start to mend themselves after Hulk's attack, speaking of whom we would see Bruce Banner in a highly guarded, highly secure facility in the raft, never to be released again. For now, at least. We would see Tony and Steve start to talk as they would discuss the recent events of why Hulk came to Earth. Tony says that it was something about the Quinjet exploding on the planet that he was on. But Tony would recall that he had no explosive planted on that Quinjet, so he would be confused on how it managed to detonate. That would be until he would cut back to one of Hulk's supposedly dead war-bound companions. His name would be Meek, as he would then recall the events of him tampering with the Quinjet, causing it to explode, as he felt that the Hulk's rule was beginning to grow too tame, and he was beginning to think that their leader was soft. So he had to make the Quinjet explode as a way to make the Hulk a firm dictator once more. But seeing as how his plan failed, he must try and get back to Sakaar in order to rule it once more. That is until a familiar red and black anti-hero would approach the creature. Stepping on Meek's hands, Meek would be looking up to see none other than the face of Deadpool. Hell, I stepped on shit. Deadpool would shoot Meek in the head, killing the bug. Now where can I find that Joe's Pizza place? We would get a post-credit scene of Thanos himself wielding the Infinity Gauntlet. Now he has both the Power Stone and the Reality Stone in his possession, and he would ask his minions where the next stones may be, in which they would point him to the direction of Earth. Thank you for watching, everyone. That's
a best fight of some dude MCU, yes. So he had the movie of this fight had, but that's falling about and in the deep when the Marvel Ghost Riders toward God Badger Nova Miss Spider-Man fight, but we never finished the ending scene. We got Iron Man 4, Nemo's the Supreme Man, Deadpool. You guys are falling to it, but I'm not sure it's not falling to my first one, I'm not sure. and we had Blade and World War Hulk, and then he had TV show as Daredevil season 2, Daredevil season 4, and Hero Fahrenheit season 2, Angels and Shield season 5. So yeah, that's the finish on some of the names to Phase 5. Yeah, so the next video will be I'll see you on Friday because we're going to react to a part with Phase 6. So yeah, so hope you enjoy the video, make sure to thumbs up, subscribe, and I forgot to tell you why I didn't video on last Friday because I was partying. But I thought I was partying on the next Friday about Friday the 14th, but it was last Friday, yeah. Friday the 7th of November, that's the last Friday, yeah, so that was that time when I was in the party, yeah, so that's why, so that's a video, this video to this week, yesterday and today, so hope you enjoy the video, mention thumbs up, and then don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you on the Friday the 14th of November, see you on the Friday the 14th of November.